Hi guys, welcome to Vintage Van Life. So I've got a new toy for my van, and it is this, an inverter. Anyone that has a van will probably know what an inverter is. Now, a van will typically run off 12 volts, unless you have electrical plug into the mains, which my van doesn't. This is mostly because the whole idea of my van is to be able to live off-grid without needing external power. However, when it comes to things like charging a laptop, which is the main reason I got an inverter, you can't do that off 12 volts. Or can you? You see, what an inverter does is actually allow you to run things that normally go from 240 off 12. So essentially what I do is I plug the inverter to my battery, and whatever I'm running that normally goes off 240 volts will then run off of this. So we've got the terminals here which will connect to the battery using the various wire kits that they've sent to me, and then on the other side here we've just got a simple 3-pin plug for plugging in whatever. There's also some USB ones for charging things like phones or whatever you might want to plug in there. However, in my van I've actually already fit a USB charging area for my phone, so I don't really need to use those. Now at some point, one thing I really should do is buy a leisure battery, because at the moment everything like my interior lights, these are all still running off the vehicle battery. Now I know what people are going to say.
Oh no, Alex, don't run your lights off your vehicle battery because it will go flat.
Now that is technically true, but to be honest, my interior lights use such a small amount of power that I've never had a problem with a flat battery due to that. Particularly as well, since I fit the electronic ignition, even with a low battery, it will start, and I can always crank start it too. But if I'm going to start charging things like laptops, so in the evenings I can watch DVDs and connect to the internet and all of that, ideally I really should invest in a leisure battery, because it will start to drain my vehicle battery, and I don't want a flat battery. How many times did I say the word battery in the last like 10 seconds? Now, before you get too excited about the wonders of an inverter, you can't run various things off it. For example, things like angle grinders, even a hairdryer would be a bit too much. You certainly couldn't run a microwave or an electric oven, and forget about heaters. People that live in vans often think, how can I heat the van? You know, I don't want to mess around with diesel heaters or gas or whatever. Oh, I just get an inverter and get an electric heater, boom, run it off your battery. But that would be like trying to run a Tesla off a AA battery. It really isn't designed to do that. It's not going to turn your battery into a mega source of power. All it does is mean that the battery can charge and power things that normally run off 240 volts within reason. And I double checked with the guys that sold this to me on eBay, and they said this will charge a laptop no problem. Right, so it's a few days later. I have put the inverter in, but it is not connected to the battery. Let me show you why. Down here beside my bed you'll find the inverter just mounted here, and the idea is I can sit in bed and I will be able to charge my laptop quite easily. Now at the moment, as I mentioned earlier, I'm running everything off my vehicle battery. Excuse the messy wiring, it will be sorted out at some point. As for when that will be, I don't know. Here's the length of wire which came with the inverter. So you put the end here will go on the back of the inverter, and then the crocodile clip to the battery. But as you can see, it is not long enough by a long shot. This is 7mm copper cable, and I've ordered a few feet of both positive and negative so I can actually run it. And instead of using crocodile clips, I'm going to hardwire it to the leisure battery when I get one. And I will have an inline fuse for it, and also an isolator switch so I can cut it off from the battery as well. Now these wires are HT leads in many regards, high tension, because they are going to be taking a much higher load than your regular 12-volt wiring that I've been using, for example my interior lights. And because they're taking a much higher amount of power, because you're converting 12 volt to 240 volt through the inverter, and if you run too much power through a thin wire, it will get famously hot, it can melt, it can cause fires. Too many ohms, too much resistance going through that wire. And they also say make sure you don't have your inverter cables too long. They say no more, I think they said 10 feet, which is way more than I'm going to use. I'm just going to be adding an extra 2, maybe 3 feet of wire, so it'll be perfectly fine. However, until that wire arrives in the post, I'm going to get on with some other things, including my exhaust pipe. Now my exhaust pipe, or at least the join between the downpipe and the manifold here has quite often been a problem when it comes to leaking. It's a bit hot at the moment because I've just driven the van, but you can see this bottom part wobbles about. And one thing I found was the exhaust pipe itself isn't the original, no surprise, but it's thinner in circumference. So what happens is this clamp at the top, it will grip down incredibly tight on the top part and barely touch the bottom part. And I rectified that last time with using an exhaust washer, a metal one, in between, like a bush. And it cured it for a while, but for some reason it's gone slack again. So I'm going to take it off and see if I can figure out why. So I've dropped the pipe off there. Now the bush that I had in there, which was made of metal, it was pretty substantial. It was kind of like pleated wires, and which packed out the space, so the clamp had something to really grip to. But it's not present, it's gone completely, which means the hot exhaust gases and fire and all of that coming down here must have obliterated it over many, many miles, and it's gone. So I assume the remains of it are probably in my exhaust silencer. There's not much I can really do about that. So it looks like I'm going to have to get another one and put it in there and just know it's only a temporary fix. I mean, to be fair, it'd probably do a few thousand miles. One thing I could do is, you remember that putty stuff, that metal putty that I had for fixing the tank? I'm wondering if maybe I put that around the outside of the downpipe to thicken it, and then put the clamp on that so it's got something to grip. But that's maybe for the future. I've just got back from town to pick up the bits that I need, but I didn't go in my camper, I went and dug. I'm sure many of you that have been watching my channel for a while will remember this Reliant. A few weeks back I was saying that the Reliant needed an MOT, so I can't drive it and blah blah blah, but it went through its MOT and it passed. I just had to fit new backboards for the front lights and various little bits and pieces. So it's running again, which is great because not only is it economical and it doesn't rust, it is great fun. Now the shop I went to used to be called VKM, and it was that since like the 60s or 70s, I don't know. It's called More Than Tyres now, it's in Burgess Hill, and people still refer to it as VKM. It's always like, oh, if you ever need some really obscure things, like, I'll just pop down to VKM. And I've got these, so these are two different exhaust rings which hopefully will fit. And the guy down there, Glenn, is a friend of mine, and he's actually got a beautiful Austin A35 which I took a picture of with Doug. Which is pretty cool. And he said, well, just see which one fits and then bring back the empty bag and the one that you don't use, and we'll just pay for that one. That is the kind of service that you would never get in a place like Halford's. Right, I've put the little spacer in there. It's just to kind of pack out the space so it won't rattle around. That's the smaller one of the two. The bigger one pushed down too much. So I'm going to get a jack under there, push it all together with sealant and hope for the best. Right, here we go. That's all jacked up and just pushing against the manifold up there. So I'm just going to smoothen that off, put the clamp back on, hope for the best. That's all on there. I've tightened it up, and from what I can see, if I give it a shake, it seems pretty solid, but to be honest, I don't want to be too vigorous with it. In my eyes, I really see this as a temporary fix until I actually sort out the downpipe, because it's too thin and it's not gripping properly. Packing it out, I'm hoping it lasts longer than 5 minutes, but I guess only time will tell. I've had various people in the comments and also people in person coming up to me and saying, oh, how's Jolie these days? Has Jolie got a new van? And the answer is yes. Ta-da! What are you doing up there, Jolie?
Did a bit of a bodge job on some leaks, and I was just checking the progress.
Why don't you come on down and introduce everyone to your new camper?
This is my 1986 Talbot called Gwen.
And why is it called Gwen?
After my nan. I'm Welsh.
So Jolie, can we see inside?
Oh yeah, come on in.
Oh, here we go. Right. So it's a little bit of a project, but not a massive project.
So this actually was, and can still be, 2 benches of a table, but I've just made it a big bed. We've got some separate sleeping up here.
Yeah.
And here is just a benchy area, but again this pops out to a small double if needed. storage. And then this is my loo. Excuse the shower curtain. And yeah, I haven't got a hose yet, but I just make do with like a shower bag. So it's fine, you know.
And this area here, the reason this temporary one, which we had on the PLP 50 trip, this one, the previous owners disconnected the gas. One of the things was the previous owners, when they took the gas out, I think the idea was they would plug into the mains and just run everything off 240 volt, which of course is no good for people like me and Jolie that want to live remotely and kind of be off grid. So underneath here, where there should be a hob, there is nothing at all as it's all taken out. But Jolie, I have a backup, do I not?
There is a penny whistle.
Oh.
You do!
When I've seen a lot of van conversions, particularly like modern ones, or even camper vans where people spend like, they're like, oh, it wasn't too much, it was £60,000 reduced from 90,000 or something ridiculous like that. When it comes to cooking, they generally just have a double gas hob. No grill, no oven, just 2 hobs. And I think, well, fine for when you're going on short getaways, but what about people that actually live in vans? So you guys have seen many times the oven that I have in here. So here we have my oven, which is fully functioning, 2 gas hobs, and then we have the grill in there, and then the actual oven part itself. Now these ovens, they go for anywhere between £300–400 nowadays for the higher end ones. People trying to push their luck, I guess, because van conversions are very popular, and I haven't seen a whole amount of this kind of ovens in a modern sense, the modern counterpart. So these older ones, they're really good for van conversions for people that want to live in them, and they're hard to find at a good price, but I did find one recently. So Jolie, what have we got down here?
So this is my little oven to make cookies, roast potatoes, pizzas.
Everything. Are you looking forward to putting it in your van?
Cheese on toast. Oh, I can't wait. It's so cute.
So today I went to a beautiful place in Ardingly, which isn't far from where I currently am, to an auto jumble, and it was a really good day out. And one of the things that I've been looking for my van is a lens for this headlight cover, which the rim is intact and the other one has actually got the lens in it, but it's one of these unusual sizes, being French. And there was this guy that had tons and tons of lenses and lights and things, and he said to me, oh, because I took this in, and he said, I haven't got one of those here, but I probably do at home in the workshop or whatever it is. So hopefully I'll be able to get one. I also met a guy called Joshua, and he came up to me and said, hey, I know you, I follow you on YouTube, so that's really nice to meet him. It's very strange when you get recognised, so massive shout out to Joshua, it was really nice meeting you. And my plans are, in a few days time, I'm going to be heading to Pembrokeshire, back to Wales, which is where I'm going to find some work, and it's really where I want to focus my time and attentions and really get this van done, or at least make a really good crack at it. I've still got a couple of days before I actually head to Pembrokeshire, and I have been living in my van again, which has been nice. You actually remember what it's like living in the van, for example making sure you've got water in your tank, and the other thing is, it's a bit gross, but your toilet, when you use it, it's really convenient having it here, but of course you do need to empty it at some point as well. The other thing is, it's getting pretty cold now, that kind of autumnal, wintry feel, and I've got a heater in my camper at the moment which is doing an awesome job. Look at this little beauty. So this is a paraffin heater which I bought last year, and Jolie has been borrowing it, but for the time being it's back in here. Now I'm very much aware of the dangers of using a paraffin heater. To any American viewers, it would be kerosene, it's pretty much the same thing. And they give off a huge amount of heat, but they also give off carbon monoxide gas, as does a gas heater, for example, one that uses propane. So when you're using one of these, you just need to make sure you've got a window ajar or a door, just so you've got some ventilation. And one thing that is incredibly important when using a paraffin heater is, do not fall asleep with one of them on. But I've got my carbon monoxide alarm, and I only use it for short periods of time, keep things well ventilated, always switch it off before I leave the camper, or like I mentioned, going to sleep. So all in all, it makes it very, very warm and cozy in here, even in the coldest winters, so job's a good one.